That night, the king couldn't sleep, so he ordered the records of the daily journal brought, and they were read to the king. It was found written that Mordecai had told Bactina and Teresh, two of the king's officers from the group in charge of the private entryways, who had conspired to assassinate King Ahasuerus. The king asked, "What honor or distinction was conferred on Mordecai for this?" The king's servant answered, "Nothing was done for him." The king then asked, Who's that in the courtyard?" For Haman had come into the outer courtyard of the king's palace to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows he had prepared for him. The king's servants told him, "It's Haman, standing there in the courtyard." The king said, "Have him come in." So Haman came in. The king said to him, "What should be done for a man the king wants to honor?" Haman thought to himself, "Whom would the king want to honor more than me?" So Haman answered the king, "For a man the king wants to honor, have a royal robes brought, which the king himself wears in the house the king himself rides, with a royal crown on his head. The robes, the horses, should be handed over to one of the king's most respected officials, and they should put robes on the man the king wants to honor and lead him on horseback through the streets of the city, proclaiming ahead of him, 'This is what is done for a man who the king wants to honor.'" The king said to Haman, "Hurry and take the robes and the horse, as you said, and do this for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Don't leave out anything you mentioned." So Haman took the robes, the horse, dressed Mordecai, and led him riding through the streets of the city. And he proclaimed ahead of him, "This is what is done for a man whom the king wants to honor." Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in mourning. After Haman had told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him, his advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is a Jew, you will not get the better of him. On the contrary, your downfall before him is certain." While they were still talking with him, the king's officials hurried to bring Haman to the banquet Esther had prepared. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. The king again said to Esther at the wine banquet, "Whatever you request, Queen Esther, you will be granted it. Whatever you want, up to half the kingdom, it will be done." Esther, the queen, answered, "If I have won your favor, king, if it pleases the king, then what I ask to be given me is my own life and the lives of my people. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, killed, exterminated. If we had only been sold as men and women slaves, I would have remained quiet, since then our trouble would not have been worth the damage it would have caused the king to alter the situation." King Ahasuerus asked Esther, queen, "Who is he? Where is the man who dared to do such a thing?" Esther said, "A ruthless enemy. It's the wicked Haman." Haman stood aghast, terrified before the king and queen. In rage, the king got up from the wine banquet and went out the palace garden. But Haman remained, pleading with Esther, the queen, to spare his life, for he could see that the king had decided to do him in. Haman had just fallen on the couch where Esther was when the king returned from the palace garden to the wine banquet. He shouted, "Is it even going to rape the queen here in this place before my very eyes?" The moment these words left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Harvana, one of the king's attendants, said, "Look, the gallows 70 feet high that Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke only good for the king, is standing at Haman's house." The king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's anger subsided. The same day, King Ahasuerus gave the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, to Esther, the queen. Also Mordecai appeared before the king, for Esther had revealed his relationship to her. The king removed his signet ring, which had been taken back from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. Then Esther put Mordecai in charge of Haman's house. Again, Esther spoke to the king. She fell at his feet and begged him with tears to put an end to the mischief Haman and Agag had caused by the scheme he had worked out against the Jews. The king extended the gold scepter toward Esther. So Esther got up and stood in front of the king. She said, "If it pleases the king, if I have won his favor, if the matter seems right to the king, and if I have his approval, then let an order be written rescinding the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews in all the royal provinces. For how can I bear to see the disaster that will overcome my people? How can I endure seeing the extermination of my kinsmen?" King Ahasuerus said to the Queen Esther and Mordecai the Jew, "Listen, I gave Esther the house of Haman, and they hanged him on the gallows because he threatened the lives of the Jews. You should issue a decree in the king's name, whatever you want concerning the Jews, and seal it with the king's signet ring, because a decree written in the king's name and sealed with the king's signet ring can't be rescinded by anyone." The king's secretaries were summoned at that time on the 23rd day of the third month, the month of Sivan, and a decree was written according to everything Mordecai ordered concerning the Jews, to the army commanders, governors, and officials of the provinces from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, to each province in its script, and to each people in their language, also to the Jews in their script and language. They wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed it, and with the king's signet ring. They sent the letters by couriers on horseback, riding fast horses used in the king's service and bred from the royal stock. The letters said that the king had granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and defend their lives by destroying, killing, and exterminating any forces, any people or province that would attack them, their little ones or their women, or would try to seize their goods as plunder, or on the designated day in any of the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, namely the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A copy of the edict was to be issued as a decree in each province and proclaimed to all the peoples, and the Jews were to be ready on that day to take vengeance against their enemies. Couriers, riding fast horses, used in the king's service, left quickly, pressed by the king's order and the decree which issued in Shushan, the capital. Meanwhile, Mordecai left the king's presence arrayed in royal blue and white, wearing a large gold crown and a robe of fine linen and purple, and the city of Shushan shouted for joy. For the Jews, all was light, gladness, joy, and honor. In every province, the city where king's orders and decree arrived, the Jews had gladness of joy, a feast, and holiday. Many of the peoples of the land became Jews because fear of the Jews had overcome them. The time approached for the king's orders and decree to be carried out, the day when the enemies of the Jews hoped to overpower them, but as it turned out, the opposite took place. The Jews overpowered those who hated them. Thus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the Jews assembled in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to attack anyone who tried to do them harm, and no one was able to withstand them, because all the peoples were afraid of them. All the officials of the provinces, the armies, commanders, the governors, and those occupied with the king's affairs helped the Jews because they were afraid of Mordecai. For Mordecai had become a powerful person in the king's palace, and his fame had spread through all the provinces. Malachi continued to grow increasingly powerful. The Jews put all their enemies to the sword. There was a great slaughter and destruction as they did whatever they wanted to those who hated them in Shushan, the capital. The Jews slaughtered 500 men. They put to death the 10 sons of Haman, the sons of Hammedatha, and the enemy of the Jews, Pashandara, Daphdan, Absta, Porta, Adelia, Ardada, Parmishta, Arsia, Aridia, and Vasata. But they did not touch the spoil. The same day after the king had been told the number that killed in Shushan, the capital, he said to Esther the queen, "If the Jews have slaughtered 500 men in Shushan, the capital, the 10 sons of Haman, what have they done in the rest of the royal provinces? Now, whatever you request, you will be granted it. Whatever more you want, it will be done." Esther replied, "If it pleases the king, let the Jews in Shushan act again tomorrow in accordance with today's decree. also have Haman's 10 sons hanged on the gallows. The king ordered these things to be done. A decree was issued in Shushan, and they hung Haman's 10 sons. So the Jews in Shushan assembled also on the 14th day of the month of Adar and killed 300 men in Shushan, but did not touch the spoil. The other Jews, those in the royal provinces, had assembled, defended their lives, and won rest from their enemies, killing 75,000 of those who hated them, but without touching the spoil. On the 13th day of the month of Adar, so on the 14th day of Adar, they rested and made it a holy day for celebrating and rejoicing. However, the Jews of Shushan assembled in both the 13th and 14th day of Adar, so it was on the 15th day that they rested and made it a holy day for celebrating and rejoicing. This is why the Jews of the villages, those who live in the unwalled town, make the 14th day of the month of Adar a day of celebrating and rejoicing, a holiday of time for sending each other portions of food. Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to all the Jews in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, instructed them to observe on the 14th day of the month of Adar and the 15th day every year, to commemorate the days of which the Jews obtained rest from their enemies, and on the month which from them was turned from sorrow into gladness, and from mourning into a holiday. They were to make those days of celebrating and rejoicing, sending portions of food to each other and giving gifts to the poor. So the Jews took it upon themselves to continue what they had already begun to do, and as Mordecai had written to them, because Haman, the son of Hammedatha, and Agi, the enemies of the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them and throw them through Pur, that is, cast lots, to crush and destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he ordered by letters that Haman's wicked scheme, which he had plotted against the Jews, should recoil on his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. This is why these days have been called Purim, after the word pure. Thus, because of everything written in this letter, and what had been seen concerning this matter, and what had come upon them, the Jews resolved and took upon themselves, their descendants, and all who might join them, that without fail they would observe those 2 days in accordance with what was written in this letter, and at the appointed time every year, and that these days would be remembered and observed throughout every generation, every family, every province, every city, and these days of Purim would never cease among the Jews, or their memory be lost by their descendants. Then Queen Esther, the daughter of Achiel, and Mordecai, the Jew, gave full written authority to confirm a second letter about Purim. He sent copies of it to all the Jews to the 127 provinces in the kingdom of Ahasuerus, ensuring their peace and security, and requiring to observe these days Purim in their designated times as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoyed them, and at the established for themselves descendants concerning the matter, fasting and lamenting. At Esther's order, these matters of Purim were confirmed and put in writing in the book. King Ahasuerus laid tribute on all the land, the coastlands, and the islands, all the acts of his power and might, along with a full account of the high honor to which the king advanced Mordecai, are written in the annals of the kings of Media and Persia. For Mordecai the Jew was second only to King Ahasuerus. He was a great man among the Jews, popular with all his many countrymen. He sought the good of the people and interceded for the welfare of all their descendants.